Hey guys, take a moment to settle in. Adjust your pillows. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Close your eyes, or simply let your gaze soften until the room around you fades into a comfortable blur. You are safe here. There is nothing you need to do, no demands on your time, no urgency to be anywhere but right here. Tonight, we are going to travel back, not to the loud battles of history books, nor the glittering courts of kings that we have seen so often in movies. We are going to drift into the shadows of the past. We are going to walk the quiet, muddy paths of the medieval world to look at the things nobody really talks about. The small things, the slow things, the unspoken rhythms of a life lived by candlelight and the cycle of the sun. We will explore the silence of a world without engines. We will examine the strange, forgotten textures of daily survival, the peculiar laws that governed what you could wear or eat, and the mysteries that people whispered about when the darkness closed in. It was a time of hardship, yes, but also a time of profound rhythmic routine. So breathe in deeply and let it out slowly. Let the modern world dissolve. Imagine the hum of electricity fading away, replaced by the sound of wind in the thatch and the creaking of timber. We are going back to the year 1350. The night is long and the history is hidden. To understand the medieval world, you must first understand the darkness. In our modern lives, true darkness is a rarity. We are bathed in the artificial glow of street lamps, phone screens, and LED indicators that never truly blink off. But in the medieval era, when the sun dipped below the horizon, the world underwent a transformation so absolute that it dictated every aspect of human behavior. Imagine yourself standing in the center of a small, nondescript village in the English countryside. The sun has just set. There is no twilight glow of a city on the horizon. The darkness here is a physical weight. It is thick, velvety, and total. If you were to hold your hand out in front of your face on a moonless night, you might struggle to see your own fingers. This darkness was not merely an absence of light. It was a presence, a distinct entity that changed the rules of existence. For the common person, the peasant, the weaver, the laborer, the setting sun marked the end of the productive day, but not the end of life. The day was governed by the church bells and the light, but the night had its own unspoken architecture. You're walking toward your home. It is a simple structure, a cruck-framed cottage with walls of wattle and daub, woven wooden strips plastered with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung, which has dried into a hard, windproof shell. As you step inside, the air changes. It is warmer here, but thick. The smell is distinct. It is not necessarily a stench, but a rich, layered scent of wood smoke, unwashed wool, dried herbs hanging from the rafters, and the earthy, musk-like proximity of animals. In many homes, the livestock, a prized cow, perhaps a few goats, slept in the adjacent room or even the same open space, separated only by a low partition. Their body heat is a necessary furnace against the chill of the night. You prepare for sleep, but this is where the history books often leave out the most fascinating detail. You do not simply go to bed and sleep for 8 hours. That is a modern invention. In the medieval era, sleep was segmented. It was a biological rhythm that we have largely forgotten. You lay down on a mattress that is essentially a large sack stuffed with straw or chaff. If you're lucky, you have a linen sheet, softened by repeated washing with lye soap. You settle in. The house is quiet, save for the chewing of the cow in the corner or the rustle of mice in the thatch above. You drift off. This is the first sleep. For about 4 hours you sleep deeply, a slumber born of physical exhaustion from a day of manual labor in the fields. But then, around midnight or 1 a.m. you wake up. This waking is not an accident. It is expected. It is the watch. In this period of wakefulness, which might last an hour or two, the medieval world came alive in a secretive, quiet way. This was the time for the things nobody talks about. In the total obscurity of the cottage, this gap between the first sleep and the second sleep was a time of intimacy and reflection. It was the only time a peasant had true privacy. The day was spent in communal fields. The evening meal was shared around a single pot. But in the dark watch, the world belonged to you. People would stay in bed, wrapped in their woolens, and talk quietly to their spouses. It was a time for planning the next day's labor, for discussing the worries of the harvest, or for prayer, the church encouraged this time for meditation. In the silence, devoid of visual distraction, the mind could wander through the corridors of faith or anxiety without interruption. Some would rise. Imagine the sensation of your bare feet touching the packed earth floor, cold, uneven, and damp. You might stir the embers of the central hearth, the glow illuminating the room in a weak orange pulse. You might check the animals, speaking soft words to the oxen to ensure they are calm. Neighbors might even visit one another during this witching hour, careful footsteps navigating the pitch-black paths between houses, guided only by memory and the shape of the hedgerows against the stars. This segmented sleep pattern changed how time was perceived. The night was not a solid block of unconsciousness. It was a landscape with a valley in the middle. It made the night feel longer, more inhabited. But outside the safety of your cottage, the darkness held other realities. If you were to step out into a medieval city like London or Paris during these hours, you would encounter a different side of the unspoken history, the sensory reality of the night shift. We often think of the medieval city as sleeping, but it had a distinct nocturnal ecosystem. One of the most vital yet least discussed roles belonged to the gong farmers, or nightmen. Imagine the smell first. In a city without modern plumbing, waste management was a constant, grim struggle. Cesspits filled up, privies overflowed. During the day, the air was thick with the scent of commerce, cooking, and humanity. But at night, the heavy, pungent work began. You stand in a narrow alleyway. The cobblestones are slick with moisture. From the darkness, you hear the rumble of a cart and the soft plodding of horses with hooves wrapped in rags to muffle the sound. These are the nightmen. By law, in many cities, the emptying of cesspits could only be done at night, so as not to offend the delicate sensibilities of the daytime populace. These men worked in the absolute dark, illuminated only by a sputtering lantern. They would descend into the stone-lined pits beneath the houses, pits that had been filling for months. It was a job of unimaginable unpleasantness, yet it was essential. They were the silent circulatory system of the city, removing the toxicity that would otherwise consume the population with disease. They worked quietly, moving tons of night soil out of the city gates to be sold to farmers. There is a strange nobility in this forgotten labor. These men were well paid for their time, a testament to the fact that everyone knew how vital, yet how horrific, the task was. They lived in a world of shadows, performing the tasks that society relied upon but refused to acknowledge. Watching them pass in the night, you would see figures coated in the grime of their trade, moving like ghosts, ensuring that when the sun rose, the city would be relatively clean again. As you return to your bed for your second sleep, the morning watch, the world is still dark. You pull the rough wool blanket up to your chin. The air in the cottage has cooled significantly. The fire is just a bed of red eyes staring from the hearth. You close your eyes, listening to the wind rattle the wooden shutters. The silence returns. This rhythm, wake, sleep, wake, work, sleep, was the heartbeat of centuries. It was a slower, more fragmented existence, dictated not by the clock on the wall, but by the needs of the body and the movement of the stars. As you drift back off, you realize that the medieval night was not empty. It was full of life, labor, and quiet moments that history books rarely mention, but which made up exactly half of human existence. The transition from the second sleep to the waking world is not a sudden jolt, but a slow, gray realization. The darkness that felt so protective during the watch hours begins to thin, dissolving into the milky, indistinct light of pre-dawn. You do not wake to an alarm clock. There is no digital beep to slice through the silence. Instead, you are pulled from your slumber by the organic machinery of the village starting to turn. It begins with sound. The rooster, a cliché in modern cartoons, is a piercing, aggressive reality here. His crow is jagged and loud, echoing off the stone walls of the church nearby. Then the lowing of the cattle inside your own home, a deep, resonant vibration that travels through the floorboards. The animals know the sun is coming before you do. They are shifting their weight. their hooves clacking softly against the hard-packed earth, or the stone flags of the byre. You open your eyes. The air in the cottage has changed again. The warmth of the bodies huddled together under the blankets, your spouse, perhaps children, all seeking the communal heat, contrasts sharply with the air touching your face. The room is cold. Dampness has settled on the walls during the night, and if you look up at the thatched roof, you might see the faint, ghostly rising of your own breath. Rising is a physical struggle against the temperature. You throw back the heavy wool coverlet. The shock of the cold air against your skin is immediate, a bracing slap that drives away the last fog of dreams. You sit up. Your body feels stiff. The mattress of straw has compressed during the night, offering little support for your back. The labor of yesterday, the bending, the lifting, the repetitive motion of the scythe or the loom sits in your muscles as a dull, heavy ache. Now begins the ritual of dressing. This is something we rarely think about in the modern world, where we slip into soft cottons and stretchy synthetics in seconds. In the medieval era, clothing was an architecture of survival, and putting it on was a complex, layered process. You are likely already wearing your shift or chemise, a long, loose garment made of linen. This is the layer that touches your skin, and it is the most important piece of clothing you own. It is your barrier. It protects your skin from the rough outer wool, and it protects your expensive outer garments from the sweat and oils of your body. It has a distinctive smell, the scent of lye soap, faint body odor, and the dried herbs, lavender or woodruff, that might have been packed with it in the chest to keep insects at bay. You stand on the rush matting, shivering slightly. You reach for your hose. These are not pants as we know them. They are individual legs of heavy wool, cut on the bias to offer a little stretch, though there is no elastic here. You pull one up your leg, feeling the scratchy, dense texture of the fabric. It is thick, meant to turn aside thorns and brambles, meant to keep the biting wind from your skin. You have to tie it to your brays, your linen undershorts, using points, small laces with metal tips. This is a fidgety, dexterous task to perform with cold, clumsy fingers in the dim light. You fumble with the knots. If a point breaks, your hose will sag. There are no zippers to zip, no buttons to snap. Everything is held together by tension and knots. You are literally tying yourself into your clothing. Next comes the tunic. It is heavy. When you pull it over your head, you are enveloped in the smell of lanolin, the natural oil of the sheep's wool that makes the garment somewhat water-resistant. The neck hole is tight. You wrestle your head through, emerging with hair tousled. You smooth the rough fabric down. It falls to your knees, a heavy curtain that traps your body heat. Finally, you tie a leather belt around your waist. This is not just for fashion, it is your pockets. You hang a small pouch from it, perhaps a knife in a sheath. The belt cinches the tunic, creating a blousing effect that traps even more warm air against your torso. You are now dressed, but you are not yet ready. There is a sensation that is a constant companion to the medieval person, one that history books politely gloss over: the itch. As you stand there, adjusting your belt, you might feel a sudden, sharp prick on your shoulder, or a crawling sensation at the back of your neck. Lice and fleas are not a sign of squalor in this world. They are a fact of nature, like rain or mud. Even the kings and bishops scratch. You might reach back absent-mindedly to rub the spot, a reflex so ingrained you don't even notice you're doing it. The linen of your shift is boiled regularly to kill them, but they always return, hiding in the seams of the heavy wool outer garments that can never be fully washed. This low-level irritation, this constant, subtle itch, is the background static of your physical existence. You move to the window, a small opening in the wall, covered not by glass, which is far too expensive, but by a wooden shutter or perhaps a piece of stretched, oiled parchment that glows with a sickly yellow light. You unlatch the shutter and push it open. The morning hits you. The smell of the medieval village at dawn is overwhelming and complex. It is the scent of wood smoke rising from 100 hearths, mixing with the sharp ammoniac tang of urine and manure from the animals, the wet earth, and if you are near a bakery, the faint yeasty promise of bread. You need to relieve yourself. There is no bathroom. There is a chamber pot, usually ceramic or metal, tucked under the bed or in a corner. The reality of using this in a room shared with family is intimate and unglamorous. It is a quick, functional act, devoid of privacy. The contents of this pot must be dealt with. You might carry it to the cesspit in the yard, carefully navigating the uneven floor, or if you live in a denser townhouse, you might wait to empty it into the street gutter, though strictly only at the designated times lest you be fined. Hygiene is next. You do not shower. The idea of submerging your entire body in water daily is foreign, viewed as unnecessary and potentially dangerous, opening the pores to miasma and sickness. Instead, you wash your parts. You have a basin of water. It is icy cold. You dip a linen cloth into it and scrub your face, your neck, and your hands. The cold water wakes you up fully now. You scrub hard. Cleanliness is judged by what is visible. The face and hands must be clean. You might use a mixture of soapwort or mild lye soap if you have it, which leaves your skin feeling tight and scoured. Then, the teeth. You do not have a toothbrush. You take a piece of rough linen cloth, perhaps dip it in a mixture of salt or crushed herbs like mint and sage, and you rub your teeth vigorously. You rub the gums. It is abrasive, but it works to remove the film of the night. You rinse your mouth with water, or perhaps a sip of wine vinegar to freshen your breath. The fear of the toothworm, the mythical creature believed to bore holes in teeth, is real. You check your mouth with your tongue, feeling for any new jagged edges or pain. A toothache here is a sentence of misery. There are no dentists, only barber surgeons who pull, not repair. Now you are ready to break your fast. You move to the central hearth. The fire has been banked overnight, covered in ash to keep the embers alive. You stir it, feeding it, kindling until flames lick up, illuminating the room with flickering shadows. You hang a cauldron over the fire. Breakfast is not the eggs and bacon of the modern imagination. It is humble. It is fuel. You might have a chunk of bread left over from yesterday. This is maslin bread, a dense, dark loaf made from a mixture of wheat and rye. It is heavy in your hand. The crust is thick, almost like tree bark, requiring strong jaws to tear. The inside is moist and chewy. You do not drink coffee. The beans are unknown to you. You do not drink tea. That is centuries away from arriving in these lands. You do not drink water, for the water from the river or the well might be tainted and it offers no calories. You drink ale. This is small ale, a brew with a very low alcohol content, thick with the residue of the grain. It is effectively liquid bread. It is caloric, hydrating, and safe because the boiling process killed the bacteria. Imagine the taste. It is not cold and carbonated like modern beer. It is room temperature, served from a ceramic jug or a leather tankard. It is flat, slightly sour and grainy. You take a long draught. The liquid coats your throat, the yeast and grain settling in your stomach, providing a slow-release energy that you will need for the hours ahead. You sit on a three-legged stool near the fire, chewing the dense bread, sipping the sour ale. The house is waking up around you. The children are stirring. The spouse is attending to the fire. There is little conversation. The morning is for eating and preparing. The light outside is growing stronger, turning from gray to a pale, watery blue. You look at your hands. They are calloused. The dirt ingrained in the lines of your palms despite the washing. These are the tools of your survival. In a few moments, you will step out of the door, leaving the smoky warmth of the cottage for the muddy reality of the fields or the workshop. The church bell tolls in the distance. Prime, the first hour of the day. The silence of the morning is over. The struggle of the day has begun. You have eaten your dense bread. You have washed the sleep from your eyes with icy water. Now you must leave the sanctuary of your cottage. You move toward the door. A heavy slab of oak hung on iron hinges that groan with a sound like a dying animal. You unlatch it, and as you swing it open, the full weight of the medieval world comes rushing in to meet you. It is here, at the threshold, that you encounter the most pervasive, unrelenting enemy of medieval life. It is not a dragon, nor a knight, nor a plague. It is the mud. In the modern world, we have paved over the earth. We walk on concrete, asphalt, and tile. We have forgotten what it means to live on a surface that is alive, shifting, and hungry. But in 1350 the ground is a fluid entity. You look down at your feet. You are wearing your leather shoes, turn shoes, made of tanned cowhide, sewn inside out and then flipped. They are soft, flexible, and utterly useless against the soup that awaits you outside. So you reach for a piece of technology that is as essential to you as a smartphone is to a modern human: your patents. These are wooden platforms, carved from ash or alder, shaped like the sole of your foot but raised on iron stilts or wooden arches. You slip your leather-clad feet into the leather straps of the patents. You are now standing 2 inches taller. You are hovering above the muck. You step out. The sound is a wet squelch. The street before you is not a road. It is a depression in the earth, worn down by centuries of cartwheels and hooves. It is a slurry. It is composed of rain, the churned clay of the earth, the rotting straw cast out from stables, the offal from the butcher's block down the lane, and the waste of 1,000 chamber pots. It is a dark, glistening river of refuse that smells of decomposition and life. Walking is not a simple act of locomotion. It is a skill. You must navigate the ridges of drier earth, hopping from stone to stone, balancing on your pattens like a dancer on stilts. If you slip, if your foot slides off the wooden platform, you plunge ankle deep into the filth. It is cold, cloying, and dangerous. A cut on your foot here, infected by this mire, could mean fever, gangrene, and death within a week. You walk with your eyes cast down, scanning the terrain. This is why medieval people in art often look hunched or grounded. They are watching their step. As you make your way down the lane, the village is fully awake. The air is filled with the white noise of labor. But listen closely. What is missing? There is no hum. There is no background radiation of engines, no distant roar of a highway, no refrigerator compressor. The silence of the machine age is replaced by the roar of the biological age. You hear the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of a flail hitting grain in a barn. You hear the screech of a metal file against a scythe blade. You hear the heavy, tearing sound of a plow cutting through roots. And above it all, the voices. People are shouting. In a world without telephones, volume is the only way to communicate across a distance. A mother calls for her child. A merchant cries out the price of eels. A carter screams at his stubborn ox. It is a cacophony of human effort. But there is one sound that cuts through it all, a sound that rules your life more than any king. The bell. Suddenly it rings out from the church tower, a bronze boom that vibrates in your chest. Clang, clang, clang. This is not just a reminder of the time. It is a command. In the medieval mind, you do not spend time. You do not save time. Time belongs to God. The ringing of the canonical hours, prime, terce, sext, nons, dictates the rhythm of your existence. When the bell rings, you stop, you pray, you eat, you return to work. You do not own your schedule. The bell is the audible architecture of your day, a constant reminder that you are part of a larger divine machinery. As you trudge toward the fields or the workshop, you pass your neighbors. You nod. You know them. You know them intimately. You know that the baker beats his wife when he drinks too much cider. You know that the weaver is cheating on his taxes. You know that the widow at the end of the lane has a cough that hasn't gone away for 3 months. Privacy is a concept that does not exist here. The walls of the houses are thin. The village is a fishbowl. But this lack of privacy comes with a terrifying legal obligation, one of the finis, things nobody talks about. It is called the hue and cry. Imagine you are walking past the tanner's yard. The smell of urine and oak bark is pungent. Suddenly you hear a scream. You see a man running, clutching a stolen loaf of bread or perhaps a purse. The victim points a finger and yells, "Justitium," or simply, "Stop thief." In the modern world, you might look away. You might call the police and wait. You might film it. But here, if you hear the cry, you are legally required to join the chase. It is not a choice. If you stand still, if you ignore the shout, you can be fined or even imprisoned. The law demands that every able-bodied person drop their tools, abandon their work, and pursue the criminal with whatever weapon they have at hand. A stick, a rake, a stone. Imagine the adrenaline, The sudden shift from the drudgery of the morning walk to the chaotic, thundering stampede of the entire street, chasing a man through the mud. You are the police, you are the judge, you are the jury. The responsibility weighs on you. You are your brother's keeper, whether you like him or not. This creates a society of intense surveillance, where everyone is watching everyone else, not just out of curiosity, but out of legal necessity. You reach your destination. Perhaps it is the open fields, stripping into long ribbons of green and brown. Perhaps it is the workshop, dark and smelling of sawdust. You take off your pattens, knocking the heavy clumps of mud against the doorframe. You step inside. The morning commute is over. You have survived the night. You have navigated the darkness, the cold, the lice, the filth of the street, and the judgment of your neighbors. You are tired, and the work has not even begun. You take a breath. The air is dusty and cool. You pick up your tool, the heavy axe, the shuttle, the spade. The handle is smooth, worn by the hands of your father and his father before him. You settle into the rhythm. The sun is rising higher now, burning off the mist. The day stretches out before you, long and arduous. But for now you are alive. You are here. And in the grand, silent history of the world, that is enough. We leave the muddy lanes and the noisy struggle of the open fields now. We turn our attention to a phenomenon of the medieval world that is so alien to our modern sensibilities, so quiet and extreme that it has largely slipped out of popular conversation. When we think of medieval devotion, we often think of the crusader, clad in mail, traveling thousands of miles to fight. But there was another kind of soldier, a spiritual warrior who traveled nowhere. In fact, their entire existence was defined by the refusal to ever move again. We are going to witness the creation of an anchorite. Imagine it is a Tuesday morning in late autumn. The light filtering through the stained glass of the village church is weak and dusty. The nave is packed with people, the same neighbors we saw in the fields earlier. They are silent, watching with a mixture of awe and terrified respect. In the center of the church stands a woman. She is young, perhaps 30. She is dressed not in her usual woolen tunic, but in a shroud. She lies down on a bier, the wooden frame used to carry the dead. The priest stands over her, chanting the office of the dead. The smell of frankincense curls around her in thick blue ribbons. But she is not dead. Her chest rises and falls with steady, rhythmic breaths. Her eyes are open, fixed on the vaulted ceiling. This is a funeral for the living. It is the ceremony of enclosure. This woman has petitioned the bishop for permission to become an anchorite, from the Greek anachorēn, to withdraw. She is not becoming a nun who lives in a community. She is choosing to be walled into a single room, a cell attached to the side of this church, never to leave it again until her soul leaves her body. The thing nobody talks about here is the sheer bureaucratic and physical reality of this choice. It was not a decision made in a moment of madness. It was a legal process. The bishop had to check her finances. Did she have enough endowment to pay for food for the rest of her life? The village had to agree. Were they willing to support her? And the cell itself had to be inspected. Let us walk with the procession now. The chanting stops. The woman rises from the bier. She carries a tall, flickering taper in her hand. The crowd parts. They lead her not to the graveyard, but to a small, heavy wooden door set into the north wall of the church sanctuary. This is the anchor hold. Step inside with her for a moment before the door is sealed. The space is small, perhaps 12 feet by 12 feet. It is built of cold gray stone. The floor is flagged. There is a simple bed, a crucifix on the wall, and a small table. But what defines this space are the windows. There are 3. And they are the eyes through which she will see the universe for the next 40 years. The first window looks into the church. It is called the squint, or the hagioscope. It is narrow, angled specifically, so that when she kneels she can see the high altar and the elevation of the host during Mass. This is her lifeline to God. The second window is on the opposite wall. It looks out into the world, perhaps into a servantess's room or a small parlor where she can receive food. The third window opens onto the village street or the churchyard. This is the window of the world. Through this grate, covered with a heavy black cloth, people will come to whisper their secrets to her, to ask for advice, to beg for prayers. She will become the village's conscience, its therapist, and its holy vessel. But now the ceremony reaches its climax. The woman steps into the cell. She turns. The bishop stands at the threshold. He blesses her. He sprinkles holy water on the stones that will be her entire world. And then the masons step forward. This is the sound that defines the anchorite's life. The scraping of metal trowels on stone. Scrape, slap, scrape. They do not simply lock the door. They brick it up. Watch as the heavy stones are lifted into place, one by one. The rectangle of light from the church begins to shrink. The woman stands on the other side, her face serene, watching the wall rise. The mortar is wet and gray, smelling of lime and wet sand. The crowd watches in breathless silence. This is a moment of high drama, but it is a slow drama. It takes an hour to build the wall. Row by row, the barrier grows. First her knees are hidden, then her waist, then her chest. Finally only her face is visible in the gap. She offers a final nod. The last stone is wedged into place. The mortar is smoothed over. She is gone. To the legal and spiritual world she is now dead. She has no property rights. She cannot inherit. She cannot be sued. She is a living ghost, suspended in a liminal space between the earth and heaven. Now imagine the silence that descends upon her as the procession moves away. The chanting fades. The heavy oak doors of the church boom shut. She is alone. The darkness in the cell is not the terrifying darkness of the night outside. It is a curated darkness. It is still. The air here is different than in the peasant's cottage. It does not smell of animals and wood smoke. It smells of stone dust, dry lavender, and the wax of the single candle she has lit. She looks around. This is it. These four walls. This floor. This ceiling. For the modern mind, accustomed to constant stimulation and the ability to travel anywhere in seconds, this sounds like a prison. It sounds like madness. But here is the secret, the boring truth of the anchorite. For many, this was the ultimate freedom. In a world where a woman's life was dictated by her father, then her husband, where her body was a machine for bearing children, where her days were consumed by the back-breaking labor of shearing, spinning, cooking, and cleaning, the anchor hold was a sanctuary of autonomy. Here she has no master but God. She has no domestic duties. She does not have to cook. Food is brought to her. She does not have to labor in the fields. She has been given the gift of time, endless, unspooling time. She sits on the edge of her simple bed. She runs her hand over the rough wool of her habit. The texture is real. The cold seeping up through the stones is real. But the anxiety of the outside world, the plague, the taxes, the war, the hunger, is now on the other side of the wall. She has traded the chaos of the medieval struggle for the predictable, rhythmic, boring safety of the stone womb. She listens. She can hear the muffled sounds of the village outside, a dog barking, a cart rattling, but they sound distant like a memory. She is no longer a participant. She is an observer. She kneels before the squint. Through the narrow slit, she sees the red glow of the sanctuary lamp in the church. It is the only light that never goes out. The first night in the cell is the hardest. The silence is loud. The mind, stripped of distractions, begins to race. But she has a tool for this. She has the rule. Anchorites live by strict guidebooks, like the Ancrane Visa. It gave them a structure more rigid than the bells of the village. It told them when to wake, when to sleep, what to recite, what to think. It was a manual for occupying the mind in a void. Keep your hands busy, the rule says. Scrape the earth from the floor. Sew vestments for the church. Do not let the devil find you idle. So she begins her routine. She takes a needle and thread. In the dim light she begins to stitch. The repetition is soothing. In, out, in, out. The thread pulls through the linen with a soft hiss. The rhythm of her breathing aligns with the rhythm of her hands. The hours pass. The light in the high window shifts across the floor, a slow-moving sundial that marks the passage of her life. She watches a spider spinning a web in the corner. In the outside world she would have swept it away. Here it is a companion. She watches the engineering of the web, the patience of the creature. She realizes they are the same, both waiting, both woven into a corner of the world, waiting for sustenance to come to them. This is the beginning of her journey, not a journey of miles, but of depth. She is sinking into the floor of history, becoming a fixture as permanent as the gargoyles on the roof. She has become part of the architecture, and as the sun sets on her first day, turning the cell into a box of shadows, she realizes something profound. She is not trapped. The wall has not shut her out of the world. It has shut the world out of her. She is safe. She lies down on her hard bed. The stone walls seem to hum with the accumulated prayers of the day. She closes her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she sleeps not as a servant, not as a wife, not as a mother, but as a keeper of the silence. Time in the anchor hold does not flow like a river. It drips. It accumulates in pools, heavy and still. We rejoin our anchorite. Let us call her Julian, a common name for such women in honor of Saint Julian, several years into her enclosure. The drama of the bricking up ceremony is a distant memory, faded like the paint on the church walls. The terror of the first night has evaporated, replaced by something far more profound and far more difficult to describe. The architecture of routine. To understand the reality of this life, we must look at the physical space again. It is not empty. Over the years, the cell has acquired a personality. The cold stone floor is now covered in rush mats, woven from river reeds which smell of dried grass and dust. There is a small altar covered in a linen cloth, stiff with wax drippings from thousands of hours of candlelight. And there is movement, one of the few luxuries allowed to an anchorite, explicitly mentioned in the Ancrene Vitae, the rulebook for this life, was a cat. Ye shall not possess any beast, my dear sisters, save only a cat. Imagine this creature, a small grey tabby perhaps, warm and soft against the hard angles of the stone room. It serves a practical purpose, keeping the mice away from the anchorite's food stores. But its true purpose is tactile. In a life devoid of human touch, where she will never again hold a child, shake a husband's hand, or embrace a friend, the cat is the sole anchor to the physical world of affection. Picture Julian sitting on her low stool near the small fire that warms the cell in winter. The cat is curled in her lap. She runs her hand over its fur. The sensation is electric in the quiet room. The cat's purr resonates against her chest. This interaction, this simple rhythmic stroking of a sleeping animal, becomes a meditation in itself. It is a reminder of the softness of the world she has left behind. But she is not entirely cut off. And here we uncover one of the most fascinating contradictions of the medieval anchorite. She was a recluse who was never alone. Turn your attention to the third window, the one facing the churchyard or the village street. This is the parlor window. In the rulebooks, it was often called the house of gossip. While the anchorite was dead to the world legally, she was vividly alive to the community socially. She was a celebrity. She was an oracle. She was the village therapist. Throughout the day, shadows fall across the grate of this window. People come. Imagine the scene. It is mid-morning. A peasant woman approaches the window. She stands in the churchyard, amidst the grave markers, and leans close to the black cloth that covers the opening. She whispers, "Lady Julian, my cow has stopped giving milk." Lady Julian, my husband, looks at the miller's daughter with strange eyes. Lady Julian, I am afraid of dying. From the dark interior, Julian listens. She's a vessel for the anxieties of the entire parish. She knows every secret. She knows who is stealing, who is lying, who is suffering. The village pours its guilt and fear into her cell, and she in turn offers prayers, advice, and comfort. She is a spiritual distinct, absorbing the toxins of the community so they don't have to carry them. But the rule books warned her strictly about this window. Do not become a gatherer of news, they said. Do not be like the magpie chattering of what you have heard. Yet human nature is persistent. The anchor hold often became the news hub of the village. If a traveler came through town, they would stop at the anchorite's window to pay respects, and inevitably, to share news of the war in France, the price of wool in the next shire, or the death of a king. Julian, sitting in her box of stone, might be the best informed person in the entire district. Now consider the logistics of her survival. This is the boring reality that history glosses over. How did she eat? She had no kitchen. She could not go to the market. She was entirely dependent on the charity of others and the competence of her servants. Yes, servants. An anchorite usually had 2 maids who lived in a room adjacent to her cell, the maid S room. These women were the bridge between the dead and the living. They did the shopping. They cooked the meals. They handled the laundry. Once a day, typically around noon, a hatch in the wall would slide open. A wooden bowl would be passed through. The diet was humble but sufficient. Pottage, a thick stew of oats, peas, and perhaps a bit of salt pork or fish on holy days. A chunk of bread, a jug of ale. Julian eats slowly. There is no rush. There is nowhere to go. She chews every bite, tasting the grain, the salt, the earth. The act of eating becomes a sacrament. She is eating the charity of her neighbors. The spoon scrapes the bottom of the wooden bowl. Scrape, scrape, a sound that marks the middle of her day. And then, the grim reality of biology. The cell is a closed system. What goes in must come out. In the corner of the cell, or perhaps built into a niche in the wall, is a latrine chute or a simple covered pot. The maids would empty this from the outside through a special hatch, or she would pass it to them. It was a humbling daily reminder of her mortality. Even a saint must deal with waste. The smell would linger in the small, unventilated space, mixing with the incense and the wood smoke, creating the unique, dense olfactory signature of the medieval interior. As the afternoon wears on, the light in the cell changes. The sun moves past the south window. The shadows lengthen. This is the time for opus manuum, manual labor. Julian picks up her needle again. She is embroidering a cope, a heavy ceremonial cloak for the priest. The silk thread is smooth and cool. The gold wire catches the last of the daylight. This work is not for profit. It is for sanity. The mind, left to float in a vacuum, will hallucinate. It will invent demons. It will replay old regrets. To anchor her mind, she focuses on the stitch. The needle pierces the fabric. Pop. She pulls the thread through. Swish. She ties a knot. She works until her eyes ache. The cell is dimming now. The world outside is quieting down. The laborers are returning from the fields. The cows are being driven home. She hears the familiar rhythm of the village winding down, a rhythm she used to be part of, but now only observes, like a passenger on a ship watching the shore drift away. As dusk settles, she lights a single beeswax candle. The flame is small, a teardrop of light that pushes back the heavy gloom of the stone corners. She moves to the squint, the window looking into the church. The church is empty now, cavernous and dark, but the sanctuary lamp glows red in the distance. She kneels. The stone floor is hard on her knees, which have developed thick calluses over the years, like the pads of a camel. She recites the evening offices. Her voice is a whisper, barely audible even to the cat sleeping on the bed. Deus in adiutorium meum intend. Oh God, make speed to save me. The words bounce softly off the walls. She is speaking to the empty church, to the stone saints, to the silence. This is the hardest time of day, the atidia, the noonday demon. The spirit of listlessness and despair often strikes now. The question rises in her throat. Why am I here? What is the point of this box? But then the bell rings in the tower above her. The vibration travels down through the masonry, shaking the dust from the ceiling. It resonates in her teeth, in her bones. It is the voice of the structure that holds her. She is not just a woman in a room. She is the heart of the church. She is the battery that keeps the spiritual engine of the village running. While they sleep, she wakes. While they sin, she repents. She is the ballast in the ship. She blows out the candle. The smoke curls up, invisible in the sudden dark. She finds her bed by memory. She lies down, pulling the wool blanket up. The cat jumps up, circling 3 times before settling against her legs. She listens to the wind howling around the corners of the stone cell. She is safe. She is buried, yet breathing. She is a seed waiting in the dark, not to grow, but to endure. And so, the second part of her night begins. We have watched our anchorite, Julian, settle into the stone womb of her cell. We have seen her stroke the grey fur of her cat and listen to the whispered sins of the village through the grilled window. But now, we must face the inevitable conclusion of this static journey. The most profound aspect of the anchoritic life was not the living of it, but the ending of it. For us in the modern world, moving house is a standard part of life. We move for jobs, for love, for better views. But for Julian, the concept of moving ended the day the masons laid the last brick. She is in her final room, and the thing nobody talks about is the sheer, grinding, geological slowness of waiting for the end in a room that is destined to become your tomb. Let us accelerate the clock, but only slightly. Let the seasons flicker past the high window like the pages of a book turning in the wind. 10 years pass, then 20, then 30. The world outside the cell undergoes violent convulsions. A king dies of dysentery. A new king is crowned amidst trumpets that Julian hears only as a distant, muffled vibration. The Black Death may sweep through the village, silencing the voices at her window for a time, replacing the gossip with the weeping of widows and the rumble of the death cart. She survives it, protected by her isolation, a solitary survivor in an ark of stone. Inside the cell, the changes are microscopic. The stone step beneath the squint wears down by another fraction of an inch, eroded by the friction of her woolen knees. The soot from the candle darkens the ceiling a shade deeper. The cat grows old, its muzzle turning white, its movements stiff, until one day it simply does not wake up. This is a tragedy of immense proportions in the anchor hold. The loss of the animal is the loss of the only warm, tactile thing in her universe. She might weep, but quietly. The rule books are strict about excessive grief. She must hand the small body through the servant's hatch. She cannot bury it herself. She cannot step outside to lay it in the earth. She passes her companion out into the void, and the hatch slides shut. The cell is empty again. And Julian herself changes. This is the grim, unspoken reality of the holy life, the toll of the damp. The medieval world was wet. Stone walls breathe moisture. In winter, the walls of the anchor hold glisten with condensation. For a young woman, this is uncomfortable. For an old woman, it is a torture device. Arthritis, or dropsy, or gout, as they might have called it, settles into her joints. Her fingers, once nimble enough to embroider gold thread into altar cloths, become gnarled and stiff. The needle becomes difficult to hold. The act of kneeling at the squint becomes a production of pain, a grinding of bone against bone that she offers up as a silent prayer. Her eyesight begins to fail. The squint, that narrow slit aimed at the high altar, becomes a blur of candlelight and shadow. She can no longer clearly see the elevation of the host. She can only hear the bell ring at the moment of consecration. She becomes a listener in the dark. The boring history here is the history of decline without palliative care. There is no aspirin. There is no heating pad. There is only the wool blanket, the dying fire, and the patience of iron. And then comes the day of the final transition. It is not dramatic. There is no angelic choir bursting through the roof. It is a Tuesday, much like the Tuesday she entered 40 years ago. The maid opens the hatch to pass in the pottage, but Julian does not come to the opening. The maid calls out. There is no answer. The village priest is summoned. This is one of the few legal reasons the cell can be breached. They break the seal on the heavy wooden door, or perhaps they simply climb through the servant's window. They find her on the bed. She has simply stopped. The machinery of her body, worn out by the damp and the fasting and the silence, has ceased. Now we witness the final, most jarring reality of the anchorite's existence. She is not carried out of the church. She is not taken to the graveyard to be buried under the yew trees with the rest of the villagers. She is already home. The masons return. This time they bring pickaxes. They pull up the flagstones of the cell floor, the very stone she walked on for 4 decades. They dig a hole in the earth beneath her bed. It is a tight fit. The cell is small. The grave is shallow. They lower her body into the earth of the cell. There is a brief service, the requiem, chanted within the walls that heard her breathing for a lifetime. They sprinkle earth over her. They replace the flagstones. The room is swept. The smell of incense covers the smell of the disturbed earth. And then the bishop reviews the waiting list. Because yes, there is a waiting list. This life of extreme confinement was so desirable, so revered, that there were often other women waiting for a vacancy. The cell does not remain empty for long. A new anchorite is chosen. The enclosure ceremony happens again. A new woman walks in, perhaps stepping unknowingly over the bones of her predecessor beneath the floor. The cycle resets. The silence resumes. But let us drift forward now, out of the medieval era and into the harsh light of the modern day. What happened to these cells? Why do we not see them attached to our churches today? The answer lies in the violence of the Reformation in the 16th century. When King Henry VIII broke with Rome and dissolved the monasteries, the anchor holds were targets. They were seen as superstitious parasitic institutions. The living ghosts were evicted. Imagine the trauma of an anchorite. An old woman who has not seen the sun in 30 years being dragged out of her cell by soldiers. She's blinked into the blinding daylight, her world shattered, told that her lifetime of sacrifice was a lie. She is cast out onto the roads, a refugee in a world she no longer understands. The cells were destroyed. They were demolished for their stone, or turned into storage sheds for the gravediggers. The squints were bricked up. The history was erased. However, the boring history has a way of resurfacing. Occasionally in modern England, a renovation team working on an ancient parish church will make a discovery. They might be installing a new heating system or stabilizing a crumbling wall. They pull back a section of plaster in the chancel and find a blocked-up window that looks like a slit, a squint. Or, more hauntingly, they lift the floorboards of a vestry to lay new pipes, and they find something that shouldn't be there. They find a skeleton. It is not in the graveyard. It is tucked tight against the foundation of the church wall, curled in a fetal position, often facing the altar. Archaeologists are called in. They dust off the bones. They analyze the isotopes in the teeth. They find that this person ate a very specific diet, low in meat, high in fish, consistent with a religious contemplative. They find that the bones show signs of severe osteoporosis and lack of vitamin D, the signature of a life lived indoors, away from the sun. They have found the anchorite. These bones are the only physical evidence left of a life so quiet it almost didn't exist. They are the calcified remains of a boring choice made 600 years ago. As you look at these bones in a museum display case, or read about them in a dry archaeological report, try to bridge the gap. Try to imagine the flesh on these bones. Imagine the cold draft from the window. Imagine the smell of the beeswax. Imagine the sheer mental fortress required to stay in that room day after day, decade after decade, while the world burned and bloomed outside. It was a life of nothingness, but in that nothingness, they found everything. They found a universe in a nutshell. The cell is gone now. The village has become a commuter town. The church is locked on weekdays, but if you stand near the north wall on a quiet evening when the traffic dies down, and you press your hand against the cold, rough flint of the church exterior, you might feel the faint, stubborn echo of a silence that refused to be broken. And that brings us to the end of our time with the living ghosts. We leave them in their peace, buried beneath the floors of history. We must now turn our eyes to a different kind of reality. We have explored the night, and we have explored the spiritual interior. But the medieval world was also a world of flesh, of blood, and of the bizarre, misunderstood mechanics of the human body. We are going to move from the silence of the cell to the smells of the surgeon's table. We are going to explore why you really did not want to get sick in the year 1350. You are sitting in a chair. It is a high-backed wooden chair with a cushion of velvet that has seen better days. You are not feeling well. In the modern world, if you feel a fever rising or a dull ache in your side, you have a mental map of what is happening. You visualize bacteria, viruses, inflamed tissues, or perhaps a pulled muscle. You think in terms of biology, chemistry, and mechanics. But here in the year 1350, you have no such map. You do not have an immune system. You do not have organs that function as pumps or filters. Instead, you are a walking ecosystem of elements. You are a microcosm of the universe. Your body is not a machine. It is a garden, and that garden is experiencing bad weather. This brings us to the most fundamental yet often misunderstood aspect of medieval life, the theory of the four humors. To understand why medieval people did what they did, why they bled themselves, why they ate specific strange foods, why they timed their baths with the moon, you must understand that they believed they were essentially bags of fluid. Imagine your body contains four distinct liquids. First, there is blood. This is the hot, moist element. It is the essence of life, associated with spring and the element of air. If you have too much of it, you are sanguine, flush-faced, energetic, perhaps a bit manic. Second, there is phlegm. This is the cold, moist element. It is associated with water and winter. It makes you slow, thoughtful, calm, or phlegmatic. Third, there is yellow bile. This is hot and dry like fire in summer. It lives in the gallbladder. It makes you angry, ambitious, choleric. And finally, the most dangerous and mysterious of them all, black bile. This is cold and dry like the earth in autumn. It is the heavy sediment of the soul. If you have too much, you are melancholic, depressed, anxious, sleepless. You are sitting in that chair because your weather is off. You are out of balance. Perhaps you have too much heat, a fever. Therefore, logically, you must add cold. You might be prescribed a cucumber, or you might be told to sit on a cold stone. But how do you know which fluid is the problem? You cannot take an X-ray. You cannot draw blood for a lab test. You call for the physician. Now we must distinguish between the people who heal. There is the wise woman in the village with her herbs, whom you visit for a cut finger. There is the barber surgeon with his sharp knives, whom you visit for a toothache or a broken leg. But the physician? He is a man of books. He is a philosopher. He likely studied at the University of Bologna or Paris. He speaks Latin. He wears long, expensive robes to signal that he does not work with his hands. Touching the body is beneath him. He deals in theories. He enters your room. He does not take your temperature. He does not listen to your heart. Instead, he asks for one thing, the flask. He pulls out a glass vessel, round at the bottom and thin at the neck. It is called a matula. He holds it up to the light coming through the window. Inside is your urine. This is the art of uroscopy. It is the MRI of the Middle Ages. The physician is not just looking at it, he is consulting a urine wheel. This is a diagram, often beautifully illustrated in manuscripts, that looks like a wheel of fortune. Around the rim are 20 different shades of urine, ranging from clear as water to red as gold to black as ink. He swirls the flask. He studies the sediment, the clouds floating in the liquid. He looks at the foam on top. Is the urine white as milk? That implies an excess of phlegm. Is it red as rose? That implies an excess of blood. Is it green as cabbage? That is a very bad sign. He might even, and this is a detail often left out of polite histories, taste it. A sweet taste might indicate the wasting disease, diabetes. A bitter taste might indicate an issue with bile. He nods gravely. He sets the flask down. He opens a book, but he is not looking up a prescription yet. He is looking up the date. This is the second great pillar of medieval boring medicine, the zodiac man. You cannot treat a body without consulting the stars. In the medieval mind, the macrocosm, the universe, is directly linked to the microcosm, you. Every part of your body is ruled by a specific astrological sign. Imagine a drawing of a man. On his head sits the ram, Aries. The head is ruled by Aries. On his neck, the bull, Taurus. On his arms, the twins, Gemini. On his heart, the lion, Leo. Down to his feet, which are ruled by the fish, Pisces. The physician asks, "Where is the moon today?" If the moon is in Gemini, he cannot touch your arms or shoulders. To bleed you from the arm while the moon is in the sign of the arms would be catastrophe. It would cause an uncontrollable hemorrhage. You must wait. Come back on Thursday, he says. The moon will have moved into Cancer. This brings a terrifying bureaucratic slowness to medical care. You are in pain now. You are hot now. But the stars say, wait. So you wait. You endure. You lie in your bed, watching the shadows lengthen, drinking water mixed with vinegar to cool your blood, waiting for the celestial clock to tick past the danger zone. The physician prescribes a diet to rebalance your humors. If you are too hot, feverish, you must eat cold foods. But cold doesn't mean temperature. It means the intrinsic nature of the food. A melon is cold, a pear is cold, lettuce is extremely cold. But pepper is hot. Even if you freeze a peppercorn, it is hot in the medieval mind. Chicken is temperate. Beef is earthy and dry. He tells you to eat stewed lettuce and avoid red meat. He charges you a fee that equates to a month's wages for a laborer. He leaves. You are left alone with your fluids and your stars. But let's say the diet doesn't work. Let's say the fever spikes. The red fluid, the blood, is clearly winning. It is boiling inside you. There is too much of it. The vessel is overfull. You need to release the pressure. You need the barber surgeon. This is where the history shifts from the academic to the visceral. The physician talks, the barber acts. You send a servant to the shop with the red and white pole outside. The pole represents the blood and the bandages. The barber arrives. He is not a philosopher. He is a craftsman. His hands are stained. He smells of old blood and stale wine. He carries a leather roll of tools. He unpacks them on your bedside table. A fleam, a small nasty little blade that looks like a calm, triangular shark tooth. A bleeding bowl, shallow, often made of pewter or brass. Bandages made of linen. He rolls up your sleeve. He ties a tourniquet around your upper arm to make the vein swell. The basilic vein or the cephalic vein. He chooses carefully based on which organ needs relief. He does not wash his hands. He does not sterilize the blade. He might wipe it on his apron, which is stiff with the dried fluids of previous patients. Germ theory is 500 years away. To him, infection is not caused by microscopic bugs. It is caused by bad air, miasma, or bad humors. He feels for the pulse. He positions the fleam over the blue line of the vein. He looks at you. Look away, he says. You turn your head to the wall. You look at the tapestry hanging there, or the crack in the plaster. You grit your teeth. Tap. He strikes the back of the fleam with a small wooden stick. The metal bites. You feel a sharp, stinging heat. Then the sensation of running water. The boring part of bloodletting is the waiting. It is not a quick splash. It is a slow, rhythmic filling of the bowl. Drip, drip, drip. You watch the steam rise from your own blood in the cool air of the room. You start to feel lightheaded. The room swims. The edges of your vision go gray. That is enough, the barber says. He unties the tourniquet. He places a pad of linen over the cut and binds it tight. You lie back. You feel weak, exhausted, drained. But oddly, you feel calm. The pressure is gone. The sanguine excess has been drained into a bowl to be thrown into the garden. You have been rebalanced. But what if the problem isn't in your blood? What if the problem is deeper? What if the demon of pain is hiding inside your skull? As you drift into a light, woozy sleep, you hope you never have to find out, because the treatments for the head are where the true nightmares of the medieval medical boringness begin. We leave the blood-stained apron of the barber surgeon for a moment. We step out of the sick room and into the street, walking toward a shop that smells unlike anything else in the medieval city. It does not smell of dung or wood smoke. As you push open the door, you're hit by a wall of scent that is exotic, dusty, and overwhelming. It smells of pepper, cinnamon, dried roots, resin, and something muskier, something ancient. You are in the apothecary. If the physician is the theorist and the barber is the mechanic, the apothecary is the alchemist of the pantry. He stands behind a heavy oak counter, surrounded by rows of blue and white ceramic jars, each labeled in mysterious Latin script. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the ceiling. Sage, wormwood, hyssop, creating a lowering canopy that brushes the top of your head. You are here to buy a cure. But in the medieval world, the line between medicine, magic, and cooking is virtually non-existent. Let us look at what is on the shelf. The boring truth of medieval medicine is that it was often an exercise in consumption. You didn't just take a pill, you ingested the world. The apothecary reaches for a jar. He removes the lid. Inside is a fine brown powder. It looks like cocoa. It smells faint and earthy. This is mumia. It is one of the most expensive and sought-after medicines in the world. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It is the ground-up remains of ancient Egyptian mummies. In a trade network that stretched from Cairo to Venice to London, the bodies of the ancient dead were dug up, shipped across the sea, and ground into dust to be eaten by the living. The logic was simple, if macabre. The ancients knew the secret of preservation. Their bodies had lasted for thousands of years. Therefore, by eating them, you might absorb that power of preservation. You are eating time itself. The apothecary weighs the dust on a small brass scale. He measures it against a tiny weight made of lead. You will mix this with wine and drink it to stop internal bleeding or to cure a headache. He puts the jar back and reaches for another. This one is sticky, black, and smells of tar and honey. This is theriac. If you were a king, a bishop, or a wealthy merchant terrified of poison, this was your daily vitamin. Theriac was the universal antidote. It was the most complex substance mankind had ever invented. A true theriac took months, sometimes years, to create. It contained 64 distinct ingredients. It had opium for pain. It had cinnamon and myrrh. It had rhubarb. But the key ingredient, the one that gave it its power, was the flesh of vipers. The logic here was sympathetic magic. The viper is poisonous. Therefore, its flesh must contain the cure for poison. The apothecary would roast the vipers, grind the meat, mix it with the herbs and honey, and then, this is the crucial part, he would let it ferment. Like a fine wine, theriac had to age. A batch might sit in a large vat for 12 years before it was considered potent. Imagine the patience required. Imagine the apothecary stirring the black viscous jam, watching the seasons change, waiting for the medicine to ripen. When you bought a small pot of it, you were buying a decade of labor. You would take a piece the size of a walnut every morning, swallowing the bitter, spicy, intoxicating mixture, believing that you were now invincible. But what if herbs and powders are not enough? What if the pain is too great? We must now address the terrifying reality of surgery. In the modern world, we have the blessing of anesthesia. We count backward from 10 and we wake up when it is over. In 1350 you are awake, you are present. You are a participant in your own dissection. However, it is a myth that there was nothing. There was the dwale. The apothecary reaches under the counter for a dark, heavy bottle. The dwale was a crude anesthetic cocktail. The recipe is a laundry list of danger. The gall of a boar, hemlock, opium, henbane, lettuce juice, and vinegar. It worked. It would knock you out. But the margin for error was razor thin. Too little, and you wake up screaming when the knife touches you. Too much, and you never wake up at all. It was often said that the dwale was more dangerous than the surgery. Many surgeons refused to use it, preferring strong men to hold the patient down, trusting in speed rather than sleep. But let us assume you have taken the risk. You have drunk the dwale. The room is spinning. The apothecary's face elongates and twists. The sounds of the street fade into a dull roar. You are carried back to the barber surgeon. But this time the problem is not your blood, it is your head. You have been acting strangely. You hear voices. Or perhaps you had a fall and your skull is cracked. Or perhaps you have falling sickness, epilepsy. The surgeon decides that the bad humors are trapped inside your skull. The pressure must be released. The demons must be let out. He is going to perform a trepanation. This is one of the oldest surgical procedures in human history, and in the medieval era it was shockingly common. You are strapped to a chair. Your head is shaved. The skin is pale and vulnerable. The surgeon takes a knife and makes an incision in the scalp. He peels back the skin. Pause. Breathe. The description remains clinical, focused on the mechanics, not the gore. He picks up the trephine. It looks like a corkscrew or a brace and bit used by a carpenter. It has a saw-toothed circular blade at the bottom. He places the metal teeth against the exposed white bone of your skull, and he begins to turn. Grind, grind, grind. The sound is what you would remember if you were awake. It is the sound of metal biting into calcium. It is a conduction of vibration that travels directly through your skull into your inner ear. It is the loudest sound you will ever hear. The surgeon must be careful. He cannot push too hard. If he plunges through the dura mater, the membrane protecting the brain, you will die. He must go slowly. This is the definition of boring. He is literally boring a hole into your head. He stops frequently. He blows away the bone dust. He uses a quill feather to brush the groove clean. He checks the depth. It takes time. 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. The sheer manual labor of it makes the surgeon sweat. He grunts with the effort of turning the handle. Finally, the disc of bone comes loose. He lifts it out with a small pick. There is now a hole in your head, the size of a coin. The brain is visible, pulsing softly with the rhythm of your heartbeat. The surgeon looks inside. He might drain out some blood. He might look for bone fragments. He might simply let the bad air escape. Then he places a small metal cap or a piece of gold foil over the hole, or simply sews the skin flap back over it. And here is the most surprising thing about this entire ordeal. You survive. We know this because archaeologists have found hundreds of medieval skulls with trepanation holes, and the holes show signs of healing. The bone has grown back around the edges, smooth and rounded. These people lived for years, sometimes decades after the surgery. Some skulls have 3 or 4 holes. They kept coming back. Whatever the placebo effect, or the relief of intracranial pressure, or simply the toughness of the human constitution, people walk the streets of London and Paris with holes in their skulls, hidden beneath their woolen hoods. As you wake up from the dwale, groggy and nauseous, your head wrapped in linen bandages soaked in egg white and turpentine, you feel a throbbing ache, but you are alive. You have been opened to the air. You have been tasted by the stars. You have eaten the dust of pharaohs. But as you recover, lying in the dark, you begin to notice something else. The house is quiet. Too quiet. The servants are whispering in the hallway. The bells of the church are ringing, but not for the hours. They are ringing a slow, monotonous, dead chime. The Black Death has not just been a rumor. It has arrived at your door. And for the final segment of our journey, we must leave the individual body behind and look at the collective body of the dying world. We are going to explore the boring mechanics of the apocalypse, the paperwork of the plague. You are recovering. The hole in your skull is healing. The humors in your blood have been balanced, but the world you step back into is not the one you left. While you lay in the dark, the great mortality, what we now call the Black Death, has swept through the city. But we are not here to look at the horror of the disease itself. We are here to look at the boring infrastructure of the end of the world. We are here to examine the bureaucracy of extinction. The first thing you notice is the doors. As you walk down your street, you see them. Heavy wooden doors, marked not with blood, but with paint. A rough cross, sometimes red, sometimes white. And next to the cross, a piece of parchment nailed into the wood. This is the quarantine. The word comes from the Italian quaranta, meaning 40. 40 days of isolation. But in the medieval city, it was a terrifyingly dull reality. If one person in a house fell sick, the entire house was sealed. Imagine the reality of that lock-in. The windows are shuttered. The door is padlocked from the outside. A watchman is posted in the street to ensure no one leaves. Inside, a family waits. They are not necessarily sick yet, but they are imprisoned with the inevitability of it. The boring history of the quarantine is a history of logistics. How do they eat? The neighbors, the ones still standing, must bring food. They approach the house with fear. They place a basket of bread and ale on the doorstep and retreat. The window opens. A hand reaches out. The basket disappears. The window is slammed shut. It is a transaction devoid of humanity, stripped of the usual gossip and greeting. It is purely functional. And then there are the searchers of the dead. You see them walking the streets. They are almost always women, usually older, often poor widows who have no other way to make a living. They hold white wands or wooden staffs. They are the official inspectors. When a death occurs in a house, the searchers are called. They must enter. They must examine the body to determine the cause. Was it the pestilence? Or was it just old age? Imagine the sensory reality of their job. They walk into the stagnant air of a sealed house. They pull back the linen sheet. They look for the buboes, the swellings. They are the auditors of the plague. They report their findings to the parish clerk, who adds a tick mark to a ledger. These ledgers are the bills of mortality, the grim scorecards of the city. But the true business of the plague, the thing that occupied the minds of the medieval people more than the fear of death, was the fear of intestacy. To die intestate without a will was a spiritual and legal catastrophe. It meant your soul might linger in purgatory because you hadn't bequeathed money for masses to be sung for you. It meant your property would be seized by the Lord or the church. And so the busiest man in the city is not the doctor nor the gravedigger. It is the scrivener. Enter the room of a dying merchant. The air is thick with the smell of aromatic wood burned to hide the scent of sickness. The priest is there, yes, offering last rites. But right next to him, huddled on a stool, dipping a quill into a pot of ink, is the notary. The boring reality of the Black Death is that it generated a mountain of paperwork. I, John the Fletcher, being of sound mind but weak body. The merchant gasps. The scrivener writes furiously, scratch, scratch, scratch. To my son I leave the anvil and the hammers. To my daughter the featherbed and the brass pot. To the church 6 shillings for wax candles. This is not poetry. It is an inventory. In the face of the apocalypse, people became obsessed with their things. That brass pot was valuable. That feather bed was a lifetime of savings. The scrivener records it all. He is the witness to the dismantling of a life. Because the death rate is so high, the legal system is overwhelmed. Wills are being probated in days instead of months. Heirs are dying before they can inherit, passing the property to their heirs, who also die. A single brass pot might legally change owners 4 times in a week. The scrivener's hand cramps. He runs out of parchment. He writes on scraps of linen on the backs of old deeds. He is the stenographer of the collapse. And then the silence settles. You walk through the market square. It is a Tuesday, usually a day of noise and commerce. But today it is empty. The stalls are boarded up. And you notice something strange, something that shouldn't be there. Grass. Grass is growing between the cobblestones of the high street. It is a slow, quiet invasion. Without the thousands of feet to trample it down daily, nature is reclaiming the city. It is a visual testament to the absence. The city feels like a mouth missing its teeth. But out in the countryside, the boring consequences of the plague are creating a different kind of chaos. A chaos of economics. Walk out to the fields where we started our journey. The wheat is golden and heavy. It is harvest time. The crop is bountiful, but there is no one to harvest it. The crops are rotting in the fields. The sheep are wandering aimlessly, their wool growing long and matted because the shepherds are dead. The cows are unmilked, lowing in pain. This leads to the crisis of labor. In the year 1349, while the plague still raged, the King of England issued a law that is perhaps one of the most desperate and boring documents in history. The Ordinance of Laborers. Here is the situation. Before the plague, there were too many people and not enough jobs. Labor was cheap. A lord could pay a peasant pennies. Now half the peasants are dead. The survivors look around. They realize their value. Imagine a peasant leaning on his scythe. A lord rides up. Reap this field, the lord commands. The peasant looks at him. No. The lord is shocked. No. I want double the wages, the peasant says. And I want better food. No more water. I want ale. The supply and demand curve has inverted overnight. The poor are suddenly powerful. The king panics. The Ordinance of Laborers makes it illegal to pay a peasant more than pre-plague wages. It makes it illegal for a peasant to refuse work. It freezes the economy in a block of legislative ice. But it doesn't work. You cannot legislate against math. The boring aftermath of the plague is a time of secret deals. In the back rooms of barns, lords are whispering to plowmen. I can't pay you more money. The king forbids it. But look, here is a cow. Here is an extra acre of land. Just please harvest my grain. The feudal system, which held people in place for centuries like stones in a wall, is cracking. The serf, bound to the land, is becoming the laborer, bound to the wage. And all of this is recorded in the manorial court rolls. These are long scrolls of parchment, stored in the manor house. They are the minutes of the village meetings, and in the years after 1350 they tell a story of petty rebellion. John Smith is fined 2 pence for leaving the village to work for a rival lord. Alice Weaver is fined for demanding too much for her cloth. The village refuses to repair the lord's fence. The scribe records these fines with a dry, bureaucratic hand. But reading between the lines, you see the revolution. The silence of the dead has given a voice to the living. As you stand in the rotting field, watching the sun set over a depopulated world, you realize that the horror of the plague was brief, but the administrative change it caused would last forever. The map of the flesh has been redrawn. The map of society is next. You turn back toward the manor house on the hill. The windows are dark. The Lord is inside, counting his copper coins, terrified not of death, but of the fact that his gardener now earns more than his chaplain. We are going to ascend that hill. We are going to leave the mud and the blood and the sickness behind. We are going to enter the world of the survivors who sat at the top. We are going to explore the boring luxury of the medieval elite. But be warned, their life was not just feasting and hawking. It was a prison of etiquette, a minefield of fashion laws, and a constant exhausting performance of power. Welcome to the castle. Welcome to the great hall. We have spent our journey thus far in the mud with the ploughman, in the stone cell with the anchorite, and in the terrified silence of the plague-stricken city. It is time now to ascend. We walk up the hill, cross the drawbridge that rattles beneath our feet, and enter the world of the elite. We are here to experience the life of the nobility. But if you are expecting a scene from a movie, a raucous banquet with wine flowing like water, laughter ringing from the rafters, and a sense of unbridled freedom, you must let that image dissolve. That is a fantasy. The boring reality of the medieval aristocracy was not a life of freedom. It was a life of rigid, paralyzing structure. It was a life where every bite of food, every glance, and every gesture was scripted by a code of conduct so complex it would make a modern lawyer weep. You are not here to party. You are here to perform. Imagine you are a guest. You have been invited to dine with the lord of the manor. You stand in the entrance of the hall. The air here is different. It does not smell of simple wood smoke. It is a complex, layered olfactory map. You smell roasted meat, yes, heavy, gamey, and rich. But you also smell the dampness of the stone walls, which never truly dry out. You smell the rushes on the floor, dried reeds mixed with sweet herbs like meadowsweet and lavender, scattered to hide the dirt and the refuse of previous meals. And unmistakably you smell the dogs. Deerhounds, greyhounds, and spaniels roam the hall freely. They are not pets. They are working animals, and they are wet. They weave between the legs of the standing guests, their fur steaming slightly in the warmth of the central hearth. The first ordeal of the evening is not the food. It is the seating. You do not simply walk in and choose a chair. That would be an act of social suicide. In the medieval mind, the universe is organized into a great chain of being, a hierarchy ordained by God. To sit in the wrong place is to disrupt the order of the cosmos. You stand and wait for the marshal of the hall. He is a man with a staff of office and a terrifying memory. He knows exactly who you are. He knows how much land your father owns. He knows if your knighthood is new or old. He knows if you are currently in debt. He approaches you, his face impassive, and guides you to a bench. Note that it is a bench, not a chair. Chairs with backs and armrests are rare. They are thrones. Only the lord and perhaps his lady sit in chairs. Everyone else sits on backless benches, requiring you to hold your spine straight, unsupported, for the next 3 hours. To slouch is to show weakness. To lean is to show disrespect. You are placed at a long table. You look to your left. You look to your right. You are now part of a mess, This is not a description of untidiness, it is a technical term. A mess is a unit of diners, usually 2 or 4 people. You do not get your own plate, you do not get your own cup, you are paired with your neighbor. You will share everything. This forced intimacy is one of the most stressful aspects of medieval dining. You must drink from the same goblet as the stranger next to you. You must watch them chew. You must wipe the rim of the cup with a clean cloth before you pass it back. You must ensure that you do not take the choice cut of meat from the shared bowl, leaving them with the gristle. It is a diplomatic dance performed while hungry. But before you can even think about eating, you must orient yourself in relation to the most important object in the room. Look toward the high table, raised on a dais at the end of the hall. In the center, sitting in front of the Lord, is a massive glittering object. It might be shaped like a ship, a castle, or a giant silver hourglass. This is the salt cellar. It is the great salt. In a world where food preservation is life or death, salt is white gold. But this object is more than a condiment holder. It is the equator of the room. Are you seated above the salt? If you are between the salt cellar and the Lord, you are safe. You are elite. You will be served the best wines, the freshest meats. Are you seated below the salt? If you are further down the table, past this silver barrier, you are in the lower class. The wine you receive will be watered down. The meat will be the tougher cuts. The bread will be darker. The salt in your small personal dish will be brown and gritty, not the pure white crystals of the high table. You are physically looking up at your betters, reminded with every bite of your station. Now, look at the table setting in front of you. There is no fork. The fork is a suspicious Italian invention that has not yet caught on in Northern Europe. It is seen as effeminate and unnecessary. God gave you fingers after all. There is a spoon, likely made of pewter or wood. And there is your own knife, which you brought with you from home, hanging from your belt. You are expected to keep it sharp. But where is the plate? There is no ceramic plate. There is no wood. Instead, sitting before you is a rectangular slab of bread. This is the trencher. It is made from a specific type of loaf called a manchet, but it is not fresh. It is 4-day-old bread. It has been cut by the pantler, the servant in charge of the pantry, who has sliced off the rounded crust to make a perfect flat rectangle. The bread is hard. It has to be. It is not food. It is crockery. It is designed to absorb. Throughout the meal, the servers will pile roast meats, fish and heavy sauces and stewed vegetables onto this slab of bread. The juices will soak into it. The grease will stain it. But you do not eat the trencher. Not yet. To eat your plate at the start of the meal would be the height of gluttony. You must eat off of it, treating it with the same respect you would treat a porcelain dish. Suddenly a trumpet sounds, a blast of brass that echoes off the stone walls, startling the dogs. The meal is beginning, but you cannot eat. First you must wash. This is the ritual of the aquamanile. A servant approaches your mess. He carries a basin and a towel over his shoulder. In his hand is a bronze vessel, beautifully cast in the shape of a lion, a griffin, or a knight on horseback. You must hold out your hands. The water is warm, scented with orange peel, rose petals, or sage. You wash your hands in the stream, letting the water fall into the basin. You dry them on the linen towel. This is not just hygiene, it is theater. Everyone is watching. Are your fingernails clean? Are your hands steady? In a world without forks, your fingers are your utensils. To dip a dirty hand into the shared dish is a social crime that will be remembered for years. Finally, the food arrives. It comes in waves called removes. But even the food is a source of anxiety. In the modern world, we eat what we like. In the medieval world, you eat what your biology dictates. The medieval diet is ruled by the great chain of being. Elements of air are considered the highest and most noble. Therefore, the nobility eats birds, swans, herons, peacocks, larks, storks. These creatures live in the sky, closer to God. Elements of earth are the lowest. Root vegetables, carrots, turnips, onions, garlic, grow in the dirt. Therefore they are food for the peasants whose bodies are coarse and earthy. If you are a noble, you might go your entire life without eating a carrot. You believe it would make you sick. Instead, you eat meat. Endless, heavy courses of meat. Imagine the sensation. You have been sitting on a backless bench for an hour. The hall is drafty. The fire is far away, and the stone floor sucks the heat through the soles of your shoes. You are cold, but you are being served heavy, rich, spiced meats. Roast pork with a sauce of blood and spices. Eel stewed in wine and sugar. A cockatrice, a capon, chicken, sewn to the back end of a pig, roasted together to look like a mythical beast. The flavors are alien to a modern palate. They are intensely sour and sweet. Medieval cooking loves vinegar, verjuice, and fruit mixed with meat. It is a cuisine of preservation and disguise. The spices, cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper, are used with a heavy hand, not just for flavor, but to display wealth. You are eating money. Every grain of pepper is a tiny speck of gold dust imported from the unimaginable distance of the Indies. You eat with your 3 fingers, thumb, forefinger, and middle finger. The pinky and ring finger must remain curled. To stick out your pinky is a sign of arrogance. To use your whole hand is a sign of a beast. You see the grease from his lips on the rim. You must take your cloth, wipe the spot where his mouth touched, turn the cup slightly, and drink. The wine is thick, sweet, and spiced. Hippocras. It warms your chest, but it does little to quench your thirst. As the meal drags on, 2 hours, 3 hours, the trencher bread in front of you begins to disintegrate. It is sodden with sauce. It has become a heavy, red-brown sponge. Finally, the almoner comes. He is the official in charge of charity. You do not get to keep it. This bread, soaked in the saliva and sauce of the nobility, will be taken to the castle gates. It will be distributed to the poor who wait there in the mud. They will eat your plates. This is the trickle-down economy in its most literal caloric form. The trumpet sounds again. The meal is over, but the evening is not. You stand up. Your legs are stiff. Your back aches from the lack of support. You are full of heavy meat and wine, but you feel a strange sort of malnutrition, a craving for something crisp, something fresh, something like a salad that you are forbidden to eat. You bow to the Lord. You bow to the salt. You back away. You have survived dinner. But now, you must face the true prison of the elite. You must go to your chambers to undress. And if you think the dining hall was rigid, wait until you experience the torture of medieval fashion. You are about to discover that being rich in the Middle Ages meant carrying a physical burden that could crush a weaker man. You have escaped the dining hall. You have bowed to the salt, navigated the complex diplomacy of the shared cup, and performed the role of the perfect guest. Now, you retreat to the solar. This is the private living room of the medieval elite, usually located on an upper floor, away from the noise and the smell of the servants. It is warmer here. The walls are paneled in oak or hung with thick wool tapestries depicting hunting scenes or romances. It is meant to be a place of relaxation, but as you stand there, you realize a simple, uncomfortable truth about being rich in the Middle Ages. You cannot relax. You are trapped inside a suit of soft armor. We must now talk about the boring reality of medieval fashion. In the modern world, clothing is about expression and comfort. You wear what feels good. You wear what you can afford. If a billionaire wants to wear a cotton t-shirt and ripped jeans, nobody stops them. But in the year 1400, clothing is not a choice. It is a legal designation. It is a cage of fabric that dictates how you move, how you stand, and how you breathe. Let us deconstruct the outfit you are wearing. It begins against the skin. You are wearing a chemise or a shirt. This is made of linen. It is the only piece of clothing that is easily washable. It is your second skin. It absorbs the sweat, the oils, and the dirt of your body. In a world without deodorant, where bathing is an occasional medical event rather than a daily ritual, the chemise is the barrier between your expensive outer clothes and your biological reality. It itches. Even the finest linen has a texture. It bunches up under your arms. It twists around your waist, and you never take it off. Not really. You sleep in it. You live in it. It is a constant low-level friction against your existence. Over this you are wearing the hose, These are not trousers, they are two separate legs of wool, cut on the bias and diagonally to give them a little stretch. But there is no elastic, there is no spandex. To keep them up, you have to tie them to your undershorts, brace with points, little strings with metal tips. This is a fidgety, complicated piece of engineering. If a knot comes loose, your dignity slides down your ankle. You are constantly aware of the tension of the strings. You cannot bend over quickly. You cannot squat. You have to move with stiff, deliberate motions, not because you are dignified, but because your pants might fall down if you don't. But the true tyranny begins with the outer layer. You are wearing a houppelande. This is the defining garment of the late medieval elite. It is a gown worn by both men and women that consumes an enormous amount of fabric, and fabric is money. Imagine a robe made of heavy Italian velvet. It is pleated at the waist so deeply that the skirt is 10 yards around at the bottom. It drags on the floor. It sweeps the rushes, collecting dust and flea eggs as you walk. The sleeves are the true statement. They are not just sleeves. They are architectural features. They are dagged, cut into decorative shapes like leaves or flames at the edges, and they hang down to the floor. Think about the physics of this. You have 10 pounds of velvet hanging from your wrists. If you try to reach for a cup, your sleeve knocks it over. If you try to write a letter, your sleeve drags in the ink. You are rendered physically incompetent by your own luxury. This is the point. The sleeve says to the world, I do not work, I do not plow, I do not cook, I exist to be decorative. And inside the gown, it is lined with fur. We are not talking about a light trim. The entire interior of the garment, from neck to hem, is lined with squirrel, beaver, or marten skins. Thousands of small animals have been stitched together to create this lining. Now, imagine it is August. There is no air conditioning. The windows are small slits. You are wearing linen, wool, velvet, and a full coat of fur. You are sweating profusely. The sweat soaks into the linen. The heat is trapped by the fur. You are cooking inside your own wealth. The smell of hot fur and unwashed bodies in the solar is thick and cloying. But you cannot take it off. To take it off would be to admit weakness. To take it off would be to look like a peasant. So you stand there, glistening, fanning yourself with a stiff leather fan trapped in the thermal prison of your status. But the discomfort is not just physical, it is legal. You are living under the terror of sumptuary laws. These were laws passed by kings and parliaments to police the visual hierarchy of the world. They were obsessed with the idea that a rich merchant might look like a duke. Money was not enough, you needed blood. So the law stepped in to ensure that everyone stayed in their visual lane. You look at your reflection in a polished metal mirror. You are wearing red, but is it the right red? If you are a knight, you can wear velvet. If you are a squire, you cannot. If you are a duke, you can wear cloth of gold. If you are a mere baron, wearing cloth of gold is a crime. If you are a merchant, you are forbidden from wearing the color purple, and often restricted from wearing crimson or grain, a specific high-quality red dye. Imagine the anxiety of getting dressed in the morning. Is this fur collar too wide for my station? Is the point on my shoe too long? Yes, the shoes. We must discuss the shoes. Look down at your feet. You are wearing poulain or Krakows. These are soft leather shoes with pointed toes. But pointed is an understatement. In the late 14th century, the fashion madness took hold, and the points grew and grew and grew. A commoner can wear a point of 6 inches. A gentleman can wear a point of 12 inches. A lord can wear a point of 24 inches. You are wearing shoes that extend 2 feet beyond your actual toes. They are stuffed with moss or wool to keep them stiff. But they are so long that they flop around. They catch on stairs. They trip you up on the uneven flagstones. To solve this, you have a little silver chain attached to the tip of the shoe. You pull the toe up and hook the chain to a garter just below your knee. You are literally tied to your own feet. You walk with a high-stepping, prancing gait, not because you are arrogant, but because if you walk normally, you will fall on your face. You cannot run. You cannot fight. You can barely walk. You have voluntarily disabled yourself for the sake of a silhouette. And if you are a woman, the burden moves to your head. You are wearing a hennin. This is the stereotypical princess hat, the tall conical spire. But in reality it is a piece of heavy engineering. It is a frame of wire and starched linen, covered in silk, rising perhaps 2 or 3 feet from your forehead. It is heavy. It shifts your center of gravity. To keep it on, it is pinned painfully to your hair, which has been plucked back from your forehead to create the fashionable high brow. A veil hangs from the tip, dragging behind you. You have to balance it constantly. You cannot turn your head quickly. You cannot sit in a high-back chair. You have to duck to get through doorways. Your neck muscles ache from the constant tension of keeping the spire vertical. You are a walking balancing act, a performer on a stage that never ends. You move to the window seat. You sit down, carefully arranging your 10 yards of velvet, unhooking your shoe chains, balancing your headdress. You look out the window at the peasants in the field. They are wearing rough wool tunics that stop at the knee. They have legs wrapped in simple cloth. They are muddy, yes. They are poor, yes. But they can walk, they can run. They can lift their arms above their heads. They can feel the wind on their necks. In your solar, surrounded by tapestries encased in fur, tied up with silver chains, you realize the strange irony of the medieval world. The higher you climb, the less you can move. You have traded your freedom of motion for the paralysis of power. And as the sun sets, casting long shadows across the floor, you realize that the day is not over. The most boring, intimate, and vulnerable part of your life is about to happen. You have to go to the bathroom. And in a castle, even that is a public performance, a freezing ordeal, and a brush with the architecture of waste that no amount of gold can disguise. We have examined the food that sits heavy in your stomach and the clothes that bind your limbs. Now we must turn our attention to the box you live in, the castle. In the modern imagination, the castle is a place of romance. We picture warm hearths, soft beds, and safety. But the boring reality of the medieval fortress is that it wasn't designed for human comfort. It was designed for one thing only: to stop an army. And the architectural features that make a castle safe are the exact same features that make it a miserable place to live. You are the lord of this domain. You own the land as far as the eye can see. But as you step out of the solar and into the corridor, you are immediately confronted by the first enemy of the elite, the cold. Stone is a thief. It steals heat. The walls of your castle are 10 feet thick. They have absorbed the chill of the earth for centuries. In the summer they are pleasantly cool, but it is not summer now. It is November. The cold inside a castle is not like the cold outside. It is a damp, penetrating chill that settles in your bones. The fireplaces are massive, large enough to roast an ox, but they are inefficient. They suck the air out of the room to feed the flames, creating a constant draft. If you stand in front of the fire, your face burns while your back freezes. This is why you see tapestries everywhere. They are not just art, they are insulation. They are the fiberglass of the Middle Ages. They hang a few inches from the wall, creating a pocket of dead air that traps the cold radiating from the stone. When you walk down a corridor at night, the tapestries move. They ripple and breathe. It looks like ghosts are hiding behind them, but it is just the wind, forcing its way through the masonry, pushing against the heavy wool. And then there is the darkness. Glass is a rare luxury. Most of your windows are not windows at all. They are arrow loops, narrow vertical slits designed to let an archer shoot out, but not let an enemy shoot in. They let in almost no light. Even at noon, the interior of the castle is bathed in a perpetual gloomy twilight. You live in the shadows. You navigate your own home by memory. When night falls, the darkness becomes absolute. You rely on candles, but not the clean-burning wax candles of the church. Those are expensive. For the corridors and the lower rooms, you use tallow. Tallow is animal fat, rendered beef or sheep fat. When it burns, it smokes. It smells of cooking grease and stale meat. The air in the castle is thick with this greasy soot. It coats your throat. It coats the tapestries. You are breathing the burning remains of your dinner. But the greatest psychological burden of castle life is not the cold nor the dark. It is the complete annihilation of privacy. In the modern world, the bedroom is a sanctuary. You close the door, you are alone. In the medieval castle, the concept of alone does not exist. You sleep in the great chamber. It is a large, impressive room, but you do not sleep there by yourself. Your body servant or valet sleeps on a trundle bed, a low bed on wheels, at the foot of your own bed. He is there to stoke the fire, to bring you water, to guard you. If you wake up in the night, he is there. If you snore, he hears it. If you have a nightmare, he witnesses it. The door to your chamber is never truly locked against the household. Servants come and go. Guards stand outside. The castle is a hive. The walls are thin or non-existent, often just wooden partitions that stop sight but not sound. If you argue with your spouse, the servants know. If you are sick, the stable boy knows by morning. Information travels through the castle like a virus. You are the star of a reality show that never ends, performed for an audience of people who own nothing but your secrets. And this lack of privacy extends to the most biological, intimate, and boring necessity of all. You have to use the toilet. In the peasant's cottage, you might use a bucket or walk out to the midden heap in the garden. It is crude, but it is earthbound. In the castle, you use the garderobe. Let us walk there now. You leave your chamber. You walk down a short, narrow passage built into the thickness of the wall. You open a heavy wooden door. The first thing that hits you is the wind. The garderobe is essentially a stone bench with a hole cut into it. This hole opens directly into a vertical shaft that drops down the side of the castle wall. There is no S-bend pipe. There is no water trap. It is a straight, open chimney to the outside world. If the castle has a moat, the shaft empties into the water. If not, it empties into a massive cesspit at the foundation. You gather up your heavy velvet robes. You struggle with the points of your hose. You sit on the freezing cold stone. The wind shoots up the shaft. It is a chimney effect. Freezing air, carrying the smell of the waste below, blasts against your exposed skin. In the winter, snow might even drift up the chute. You sit there, shivering, listening to the whistle of the draft. You look down into the black void. This is the glamour of the nobility. And what do you use to clean yourself? There is no toilet paper. That is centuries away. If you are lucky, there is a bucket of gong. This is a sponge on a stick, soaked in vinegar and water. More likely, there is a pile of hay or straw. Or if you are truly wealthy, squares of old, cut-up linen rags. But there is a strange, practical twist to this room. You notice that hanging on pegs above the toilet are your finest clothes. Your wool cloaks, your fur-lined tunics. Why would you hang your clothes in the toilet? Because of the ammonia. The fumes rising from the cesspit below are rich in ammonia. Ammonia kills fleas. Ammonia kills moths. The garderobe is your dry cleaner. By hanging your clothes in the stinking draft of the latrine, you are fumigating them. You are trading the smell of waste for the safety of being louse-free. It is a grim, pungent trade-off that sums up the medieval experience. You accept the stench to survive the pestilence. You finish. You dress. You step back out into the corridor, leaving the wind and the smell behind. You return to the solar. The fire has burned down. The candles are guttering, casting long dancing shadows on the walls. You sit by the window. You look out through the arrow slit. The moon has risen. Below you, in the valley, the village is dark. The peasants are asleep in their warm, smoky huts, huddled together with their animals. They are poor. They are tired. They are covered in mud. But you, up here in your tower of stone, you are cold. You are watched. You are weighed down by gold and velvet. You have eaten food that hurts your stomach. You have sat on a freezing stone over a pit of waste. You realize that the dark ages were not dark because people were stupid. They were dark because the struggle for survival consumed every hour of the day. Whether you were fighting the mud in the field or fighting the draft in the castle, the history books will write about your battles. They will write about your treaties. They will list your titles. But they will not write about the cold. They will not write about the itch of the lice. They will not write about the silence of the snow falling on the thatch, or the taste of the sour wine, or the feeling of the rough wool against your skin. They will not write about the boredom, but tonight we have. We have walked the slow, quiet path. We have seen the things nobody talks about. And so, we come to the end of our journey. The sun has set on the year 1350. The village is asleep. The anchorite is at peace in her cell. The doctor has closed his book of stars. The Lord has closed his eyes in the high tower. The medieval world was a place of immense hardship. Yes, it was a world of sharp edges, of darkness, and of silence. But in that silence there was a rhythm, a connection to the earth and the sky that we have lost in our world of electric lights and endless noise. They lived by the sun. They slept by the moon. They endured the cold, and in doing so they truly felt the warmth of the fire. They endured the silence, and in doing so they truly heard the voice of their neighbor. As you lie here now, in the comfort of your modern bed, feel the softness of your pillow. Feel the warmth of your blanket. Appreciate the darkness of your room, knowing that with the flick of a switch you could banish it. You are safe. You are warm. The mud is far away. The plague is a memory. The stone walls have crumbled into dust. Let the history fade. Let the dates and the names dissolve. Keep only the feeling of the quiet night. The past is sleeping, and now it is time for you to join them. Sleep well. Good night.